Hello, everybody. I'm Kate Harris from LGB Alliance. It's my very great honour and privilege to have Jamie Reid with me today. I'm going to launch straight into this discussion. Jamie has so much to tell us. There's so much we can learn from her incredible story. On February the 9th, 2023, an article was published in Free Press, headed with your own shocking words, Jamie. You said, "I thought I was saving trans kids. Now I'm blowing the whistle." There are more than 100 pediatric gender clinics across the US. I worked at one. What's happening to children is morally and medically appalling. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Kate, thanks so much for having me today. I was working in a pediatric gender center for close to 4.5 years in the US. And that story was my official public statement, essentially to the world, as how far it went. Regarding what I saw in that time working in that center, the biggest takeaways for me was that we were harming kids in a permanent, irreversible way with the medical interventions that we were calling treatments, things that really did not show to be helping in any way and were merely hurting kids in ways that I could no longer stand by and continue to do and participate in.
What was the immediate impact on you, your family, and also the clinic itself?
This article came out of nowhere. So the clinic itself had no idea that this was coming except for one person that still worked there. I believe that the impact was really quick across the university. And what ended up happening to that clinic within a year's time is that the clinic was completely closed. It was shut down.
And was this clinic part of a university hospital?
Yes. So this clinic is very similar to a lot of other clinics in the US, where it is tied to a prestigious, well-known local children's hospital. So I worked in a hospital setting that was the best possible children's hospital care that you could get in my entire region. And so when the article came out, immediately there were local impacts. There was local news stories that broke. There were local politicians who started directly investigating and looking at the clinic. And then I do believe that it hit quite a strong nerve nationally as well.
And like any of us, I think once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And you've basically changed your entire life. Can you describe briefly what sort of person you were before February 2023 and who you are now and what you're spending your life doing now?
In some ways, it didn't change me. In some ways, I had gone into that work thinking that I was helping children, but I was also feeling like it was brave work. I felt like it was kind of cutting edge, and I knew that it was questionable in some ways. And, I went into it feeling like an activist in the LGBTQIA at that time community. That was the phrase that we used. I was a strong advocate and a strong activist at that time. So in some ways, nothing has changed. I'm still a strong advocate and I'm still a strong activist, just now on behalf of children who I believe are harmed by these treatments instead of helped. And really, part of what led me to become a whistleblower is I always was somebody who was willing to question things. If things didn't seem like they were lining up, I really don't have a problem asking authority or power to explain. And I want to know, and I'm really a scientifically driven kind of curious person. And so in so many ways, those were very similar attributes that led me to work in the center in the first place, and then led me out to become a public whistleblower on the back end.
Can you tell me about the conversation between two clinicians that you told me was kind of the last straw for you?
Well, so there was actually a conversation really early on that was really eye-opening about what we refer to as the science of this care. So I started working there in 2018. By 2019, there was already a pretty contentious debate between the two primary doctors. One was arguing that we were treating a mental health condition called gender dysphoria. And the reason why we were doing these things in kids is because the evidence would show that it would make their mental health better, and we would give them these treatments as a pathway towards a more productive, healthy, holistic life. The other provider directly said he did not care if a child had gender dysphoria. If they said they were trans, they were trans. And he was more of this mindset that we were aligning some interior kind of soul that just needed a way to be brought forward. And these two clinicians did not agree. And it got to the point where there was a heated debate, and one of them was essentially saying this is purely cosmetic. And for me in that center at that time, it showed me really clearly that this is not a settled area of science. This is not something that has been well researched, thought out, figured out. There was this disconnect even what we were doing and why from the very beginning.
And yet within the clinic, there was agreement on the language that you were allowed to use.
Yes, very much so. So there was a lot of language policing that was occurring within the staff, within ourselves. We did that with parents. We taught other people in the whole hospital setting. We were the language police.
Meaning what?
So initially it felt like we were trying to advocate for our patients, but we would essentially tell people you had to use someone's pronouns if they told them to you. There was an incident I remember. We were a training hospital, so we would have new doctors coming in to train. We had a new doctor come. She went in with the patient. She came back, and in the clinic space, she presented the case to us as a team. This child was requesting they, them pronouns, and this new clinician was really struggling with it. And it was to the point where there was one new training doctor in a room full of people yelling at her. So every time she would say she, referencing female patient, we would all yell, no, they, no, they. And we were forcibly correcting this physician in a way that felt really demeaning, but also just really that we somehow were on this pedestal and everyone else just didn't understand, and we were the perfect future and everyone just needed to get on board and get along.
Mm-hmm. And after you exposed the Washington University clinic, you went on, I mean, you say not much changed, but I think from our perspective, it blew the US discussion open in terms of, from our perspective, what we'd seen was a consistent support by the AAP and WPATH, and nobody was actually remembering their Hippocratic oath. In fact, they were doing the opposite of that. And we may come back to that if we have time. But one of the physicians that you quoted was you said that this clinician said, we're building the plane while we're flying it.
Yes.
So was there a sense in one clinician did think they were treating a condition called gender dysphoria, which was their angle. The other said no, they were just rebalancing this poor body and mind. But when they said they were building the plane as they were flying it, was there any sense of responsibility on behalf of that clinician to say, we don't do this in any other area of medicine?
There was very little good self-reflection. There really is a belief within the clinicians in these centers that they are on the right side of history, that this is an absolute necessary thing for these children, and they will, I believe, hold on until the very end. I think there's a number of clinicians in the US who will not stop unless they've lost their license and been completely put out of business.
Well, they may be, and we can see you became what's called a fact witness, going into court to give evidence. Naturally, you've been, defamed, and people said that you obviously don't know what you're talking about, and you're transphobic, and all the usual criticisms. But there are, I think I'm right in saying there are 25 states now that restrict puberty blockers, hormones, and surgery on children who identify as transgender. And what's coming up now is the case of Skermati versus the United States in the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I've been trying to encourage people to read some of the documents relating to that case. And hopefully with this webinar, we will post some of the links so that people can read for themselves. But when I have read about this, I'm hoping, and you can tell me whether I'm being overly optimistic, I'm hoping that should the state of Tennessee win, because the state of Tennessee is one of the states that have restricted this appalling treatment of children. If they win, that will reinforce the law in the red states that already have restrictions. But what will it do to the Democrat states, such as California and the other 25, 26, 27, what will the impact be, do you think, of that case?
Okay, so I'm going to do one thing first, and this is just as an American. I do not see these as red, blue state issues.
Okay.
So one of the things that we are trying to do is reframe this, and so much of this in the US has been about language. So the other side came out early on and really captured all of the language that we're using. So right now in our country, people believe that we have this Republican red state versus Democratic blue state issue where it's all of the red states that have passed these laws protecting proto-gay kids and gender nonconforming kids. I try to think of these as lavender laws. So I'm trying to reclaim this color sense that we have passed these laws to protect these gender nonconforming and proto-gay kids. So that's just kind of how I like to frame this in my own mind.
That's really good. It's really helpful.
Yes. And so what we believe is going to happen at the Supreme Court is that there is going to be a ruling, and it will come out in June, in the middle of Pride Month. And the ACLU and Lambda Legal are going to lose. They've even basically acknowledged publicly that they also recognize that they are probably going to lose this case. What's going to happen is the Supreme Court is going to say, yes, Tennessee has the legal right to restrict for minors certain medical procedures. This will then allow the 25 other states, the 25 states in total that have some kind of laws, to have those laws go into effect. So a lot of states right now in the US have laws that are put on hold and paused because the ACLU has fought this every single state along the way.
Yeah.
So what we should see happen is most of those laws will be able to go into effect, and we will have a country where half of these kids are going to be protected. But you're absolutely right. That's going to leave us with a map where we have half of the country with kids not protected. And in some of those states, not only are they not protected, but those states have actually passed what they're trying to refer to as sanctuary laws, where they are actually setting up for court battles where there are states that will protect these doctors within those states to still be allowed to harm these kids, even sometimes when there's a court order from another state barring that from happening, or there's even a custody agreement. So Skirmety is basically step one in what's probably going to still be a long, drawn out, both legal and social political battle here in the US.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. And in the same way as we say this isn't left and right, I shall stop saying this is red and blue, because it isn't.
It isn't. And it's so tough in this country because we have really tried to reframe that narrative with the media, and that has been one of our strongest issues.
Yeah. And we can see now the evidence is building. The medical, well, I should say the lack of evidence of any benefit of the treatment proposed by the gender affirmation model is growing. It was wonderful to see Hilary Cass mentioned early on in the intervention by the Attorney General of Alabama, acting as amicus curiae in the Skirmety case. We've seen WPATH exposed over and over again. Do you see any changes coming up with the AAP or any other organizations like that? And before I end the question, surely to goodness, insurance companies are looking quite nervously as more and more cases are being brought. It's a trickle at the moment, but surely in a country like America, where insurance and litigation go hand in hand, people must be getting nervous.
Yes. So we have seen some insurance company movement. Unfortunately, we circle back to a law that also had some detrimental effect around what has to be covered. So many elements of this are going to come down to court cases here in our country. We will never have a Hilary Cass, as much as I would love to be able to utilize that model. I do not know that we're going to see the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, or WPATH really be willing to publicly make any sort of statement that they've got this wrong. We might see something that we're trying to encourage. We're referring to it as quiet quitting, where we might see some of these institutions slowly start backing away, slowly start doing things like maybe they're not going to put on their website anymore that they have pediatric surgery in a state where they would legally still be allowed to perform those surgeries. We're seeing some little shifts like that, but what we really need is a public, strong gay rights movement to step up and say, this is a human rights abuse against proto-gay kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to see a shift within the LGB.
And did you see Andrew Sullivan's article?
I did.
Go on. What was your thought on that? And maybe summarize what he said for people who haven't seen it.
So Andrew Sullivan has been a really strong individual who's come out against pediatric gender transitions for a while now. So his position really hasn't shifted. What kind of shifted in this most recent article is he is really holding firm on the concept that WPATH, that these institutions themselves really have been discredited and need to stop. One of the challenges I have with the article that he wrote is he rightfully points out that the LGBTQIA mainstream legacy orgs in this country are completely captured. What I need Andrew to do is help those of us who are trying to be on the front lines and fight for these kids and for the LGB to recognize that we are here and try to help us get that message out more into the legacy LGB orgs.
Yes.
So part of what we need is he did make a statement in that article, essentially, you know, our house is on fire and no one's going to come and save you. And I understand his anger, but I also work with gays and lesbians every day who spend every waking hour that they have in this country trying to fight for these kids and for our right to have space as same-sex attracted individuals. And so part of what I would encourage Andrew to do is think of ways that we can start bringing our message back into that fold within the gay rights orgs.
I'm just like you, always asking people to, so what are you going to do next? You know, we have one or two journalists and commentators who will say the right thing and do absolutely nothing. And I'm just wondering how we can, we have to continue to survive here in the UK as LGB Alliance, but we must support our brothers and sisters and all our friends in the US and other countries who are facing even more challenging situations than I am, than we are, not me, we. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is you've done some amazing interviews already. I hope this will add to your collection. But one that I noticed was with the trigonometry interview. It was brilliant, well done. And the co-host, Francis Foster, asked you a question that they always ask at the end of the trigonometry podcast. You'd been through much of your story and much of what you'd observed and what you thought needed to happen next. But he said to you, what's the one thing we're not talking about as a society that we should be? And can you remember your answer to that?
Yes, my answer was homophobia.
And what exactly did you mean by that in relation to this?
I had not listened to that podcast frequently, and I was not prepared. I had not thought in advance, oh, this question's going to come at the end. What am I going to say?
It was very obvious that it just came out. It
just came out. It literally just was like, oh, yes, this. But I intuitively started to recognize in the center what we were really doing, what we were really intervening with these kids was because of homophobia. So there are so many elements to pediatric gender medicine. There's been this huge social contagion. The numbers have changed. These are primarily girls now. We've seen really worsening mental health. But when we come back and drill back down into the very, very, very basis about why any of this ever started, who these children were at the very, very beginning back in the Netherlands, these were proto-gay kids. We were medically attempting to change the bodies of proto-gay kids, kids like I was, kids like you might have been, tomboys, sissy boys, the kids that were gender nonconforming from a very early age, the kids that the parents, back in the day, we just knew, our parents just knew, oh, yeah, they're going to grow up to be gay. And those were the kids that we were doing this to from the beginning, which is why I don't think that there's ever going to be an instance where a child should be given these interventions.
Yes, I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to even, when I hear commentators now using the word puberty blocker without comment, I think in a few years' time, people are going to look back and say, how can they have even dreamt of talking about drugs used to block puberty? It's so counterintuitive, because that is how you grow up. That is how you go from being a child to an adult.
Yes.
And yet they're still talking about puberty blockers being at the heart of gender affirming care. But I'm interested that I tend to not be terribly optimistic, but I am fairly optimistic about the fact that I think ACLU and GLAD and other organizations are somewhat rattled by what's going on. The fact that they think they may lose at the Supreme Court, and they're saying, yes, but it's very necessary that we make the case so that we make trans people feel that we're on their side. And I think they must be watching what's happening to WPATH, what's happening to the countries in Europe who are doing what we like, what we want to happen, which you've called it lavender laws. I think that's really good, protecting. And I like your word proto-gay kids, because we don't know how they're going to turn out. They could be tomboys who turn into straight women and have 6 children. It doesn't matter as long as they're left alone to go forward with that. But I think the public struggle with, well, they struggle with the whole subject, but they probably struggle with, why would clinicians want to be homophobic? And is it their own internalized homophobia? Is it homophobia of parents? Or is it just in society it's easier to be a straight girl or a straight boy than to be gay or lesbian? I still can't find any sort of understanding of why this is happening. I thought homophobia was sort of almost gone. I was really very naive. I thought we were having a fabulous time, fabulous life. And in the Western world, everything was hunky-dory, and we just need to, rally to support people around the world who are still getting sent to prison or worse, killed for being gay or lesbian. But it seems to be a complete volte-face from 20 years ago. And I still can't understand why.
All 3 of the elements that you pointed out, we did see in the clinic. I did see children tell me it's better or easier to be trans than it is to be gay. I saw parents who did feel like it would be easier and better for their child to be trans than to be gay. And a number of the clinicians that I worked with were gay adults who they themselves were willing to medically permanently change these children's bodies in some way to allow them to grow up to be trans instead of gay. All of it came back to, it was better to do this and to be able to fit into a heteronormative society than to be gay, potentially gender nonconforming as an adult. And we did have a short, glorious period where it did feel like we were moving in the right direction. I came of age in the 90s. I was out in the 90s, and I thought it was wonderful. Had a lot of really good experiences as a young person out. And that's just not what's happening anymore for these kids.
We do have to count our blessings. I mean, I saw yesterday a video from a candidate in is it Louisville, I think.
Oh my goodness, yes, in Louisiana.
Mel, somebody called Mel, who had a video of herself injecting testosterone into her stomach just below her
as her political video to try to win public office. Yes.
Yeah. Now, do you think that in Louisiana would resonate with voters as a vote winner, or do you think it would think, what on earth is going on? I mean, I was so shocked. I was sort of hoping that might make people go, especially if they saw the double mastectomy scars as well. People who don't know anything about it surely would go, this is madness.
Well, there's also this very visceral disconnect between this obvious woman who is talking, her words are about kindness and about human rights and about, you know, the community, and yet she's on screen selling this damage to her own body. I don't know that it's a politically strong tactic. I think in the US, most normal people, when we explain this to them without all of the rhetoric, can children change their sex? No. Most people recognize that's not possible. And also they recognize that this should never have been something that has been offered to children or discussed with children. It's just not the right thing to do with kids. But for that political campaign, for that woman, she definitely feels like that is going to still get her the likes, the looks, the clicks, however you want to see it. And it's devastating what that sells. The problem is that it doesn't just sell something to children. There are lesbians of all ages in this country right now who are being told the narrative that if you are butch, if you are gender nonconforming, if you are masculine in any way, you might as well, you're just trans.
And I was just coming to that because it's interesting. I remember the very first time we gave a press interview was published on, I think, Christmas Day 2019. Bev and I were interviewed. We'd just started LGB Alliance a couple of months before. And we talked about lesbian erasure. And of course, every single LGBTQIA plus organization took the mickey, as we say here. They laughed at us. They said, how ridiculous, you drama queens, don't be pathetic. But, you know, my view is that lesbians are being erased in law quite clearly. They already have been erased in law in most states of Australia and in Canada by the removal of sex. We have a case coming up in November next month, which the Supreme Court here in the UK will rule on whether a man with a gender recognition certificate is legally a woman and is therefore legally a lesbian. So that could be any man with a penis. We're going to wait and see next month whether the law says that we should in fact be attracted to male-bodied people. So I think we're being erased in law, but we're also being erased by this medical attack, this medical scandal. But I have noticed, and you've confirmed this for me, that it's much, much more common in the US for a lesbian couple for one of them to say, okay, I think I'm the more masculine and therefore time for me to take testosterone. My experience in the UK is that when a couple are going through that, they usually split up here. I may be wrong, but your experience is that it's widespread. And when I was looking at that candidate for Congress, I was thinking, wonder if you'll be one of these detransitioners in a few years. Someone like Erin Kimberley, who I think has been on testosterone for 20 years. And in your own case, your partner, who's now going through that very same process. I think she said she she finally realized how brave you were, and not only how brave you were, but how right you were about the damage of this unnecessary medical treatment. What are your thoughts on that, how that's going to develop? Because presumably there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of detransitioners, some of whom have maybe just been on testosterone for a few months, but some have been on it for years. And how would they reintegrate with their former lesbian sisters?
There's so much in what you just said to kind of unpack.
Mm.
One of the elements that I still grapple with, that I haven't fully come to terms with, is in lesbian relationships, it's often not just that the partner stays, but the partner often is facilitating the transition itself. And so I will always carry with me that I worked in a pediatric center and that I know that I participated in harming kids. But I also carry with me that I've injected testosterone into an adult human female and done so in a way that ended up contributing to that person's physical body being harmed. And I don't think that I'm the only woman in a lesbian relationship in the US who's done so. I know that in the US, that this contagion, that this medical scandal is not just in the kids, though. It's not just the 13-year-olds, it's the 19-year-olds, it's the 24-year-old women who believe that it is better for them to masculinize their body than to be a woman. And what is so challenging is that we haven't even begun the conversations about, there's the element of the lesbian community erasure and those individuals who they themselves have medicalized. But then as the physical body changes, the women who stay with those partners and how that takes apart their own sexuality and their own sense of their own sexual orientation. There's just so much destruction that has been in the wake of this.
Mm.
And the burden is so heavily felt on women because we're taught to be kind. We're taught to be the ones who are empathetic, to support a partner, to stay by someone's side.
Mm.
And this unraveling of what we've done to ourselves and to our sisters and to our partners and to our community, I think is going to be at least the next 30 years to try to find pathways to healing and get this taken apart and stopped.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's more than I ever anticipated in my worst nightmares. It is beyond one's worst imagination. And then there are, of course, boys who we know have been castrated or had estrogen, who are also wanting to say to the doctors, what have you done to me? What have you done? We are, in the UK, we are told that our Secretary of State for Health, Wes Streeting, is considering looking at how to set up a detransitioning care service on the NHS. And it's obviously completely uncharted territory. Nobody's ever done this to children before. No one's ever done it to adults before, unless in the most horrific circumstances that we won't even go to. But we have to at least own up to what has been done, and we have to start to understand. I mean, when you tell me about the impact of testosterone on people, I had no, I mean, I have a sort of vague ideas that, you know, it's not good, it does bad things, and you see lots of trans men with walking sticks when they're 30 years old and that sort of thing. But you describe it as being an incredibly dangerous drug.
It's dangerous, but also it's counterintuitive. So it is the intentional destruction of the endocrine system. So our bodies want to be in homeostasis. Our bodies want to take care of themselves. Our bodies want to be in balance. And it is the intentional creation of a body out of balance hormonally. And I don't see any way that that can sustain health in the long run. We would never do that to any other system in the human body, to intentionally take it out of homeostasis. And anyone who says to me that they've had no negative repercussions, I could see in our young patients' charts weight change, cholesterol change, blood pressure change, being put in a pre-diabetic state. These are not health-inducing treatments. This is not a treatment. This is the intentional destruction of a system within the body. And adults, this gets ethically fraught, but adults have the right to harm themselves. They have the ethical right to harm themselves. But I have a very, very smart friend who tells me, but doctors don't. Doctors don't have the right to harm people, regardless of the age. But when we see NHS trying to set up this detransitioner system, something that we are very far away from in the US, there are challenges, but then there's also so many good clinicians that I know, that I talk to daily, that are ready to lead the way and start helping people come out of this. But again, we're going to have institutions be brave and step up. I know endocrinologists here in my own city who would be willing tomorrow to see detransitioners whose home institutions will not set up a system to do so. We have no insurance billing codes to be able to provide this care. We have no monetary stream to provide this care. And so again, we're going to look to y'all in the UK. What can NHS set up? And is it going to be a system that we can not have to reinvent the wheel here and we can reproduce? But there's going to be another aspect to detransitioners, and that is that this is not just a medical issue that happened to the body. This was an insult to the soul. This was an insult to the way we interact as humans with other people, and we are going to have to rebuild and find ways to support all of these people in all of those ways. It's not just, can we get your endocrine system back in working order, but can we develop ways that you can have interactions with other humans and not feel like you can't be who you are? I mean, talking about language and names and partners and relationships, there's so much here.
Yeah. And just friends groups of people in similar situations, which is something that our chief exec, Kate Barker, and head of operations, Kerry Mine, have been really successful. We've got, I think, 30 in the UK now, all around, of small, could be small groups, could be larger groups, and they have no function other than the most important function of all, which is friendship.
Yes.
Getting together with friends who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, potentially who are detransitioners, but who care about each other and are prepared to love each other. You know, that's what this whole world was once, when we didn't have gender identity in the world. So I think creating those groups has been phenomenal, and I hope that I think having a big conference such as we did last month in London, or was it this month? This month is really important, so that you can get a sense that we are not alone. we are sane, we are full of love for each other, and we want to move forward to a happier future. And it's just so sad when we see the children and the young adults who have fallen for this real pack of lies that these appalling medical treatments will make them happy, when we know the opposite is true. Not to mention the impact of flupron and other puberty blockers on IQ development, which is still under-researched. But there's so much more to be done. But I think the more we can keep the conversation going with you and others in the US, the better. And if there's anything that we can do to help as we come up to this important case at the Supreme Court, and anything we can do at all, I think we should just keep on chatting, keep on doing webinars, and learn from you about what's going on and see how we can support you.
Well, you keep also leading the way. So even when you and Bev created the org that you have there, you are showing us that there are pathways out. And I will just say, being in that conference space, being in a room with that many same-sex attracted, amazing humans was one of the highlights of my life. I haven't been in a space like that in so long. It was so powerful. And I want that for every same-sex attracted homosexual adult here in the US. And we are going to get there, and we are building that. And then, maybe 30 years from now, we will have one of the most glorious parties and just recognize.
Can we do it in less than 30 years, please? Because you know how old I'll be then.
Well, you can make it. We'll get you there.
Lovely. All right. Thank you so much, Jamie. We love you. We love everything that you're doing, and we wrap our arms around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.